Let's cross to Budapest and speak to Zsolt Kerner, a senior reporter for 24.hu. Hello to you, Zsolt. Welcome back to Paris Direct. Pater Magyar, a former ally of Viktor Orban. So how clean of a break is this from what we've seen the previous 16 years?
It's quite a clean break, to be honest. So if you look at it from the outside, it's very similar to what has been before. Most of the people, or some of the people from Pater Magyar's government, are from Fidesz, from Orban's previous governments, but it is quite different, to be honest. And it's very surprising to say it, even for us, that a little more than an hour ago, the Orban era was officially over. That's when all the members of parliament took their oath in parliament, and it was officially a new era. And you can see that almost everybody who you speak to in Hungary, especially if they are journalists, are looking a bit younger than before and a bit smoother. This has not been an easy 16 years for anybody outside of Fidesz. So we expect something very different, and all the signs point to something very different so far.
And do you think that Magyar and the other officials in his government, their proximity to Fidesz, their familiarity with Fidesz, will help dismantle Orban's 16 years of governing, or will it be a hindrance, do you think?
I'm not sure that this is the exact thing that will help them, but it's going faster than anybody would have expected. So just to make a little bit of a comparison, when Viktor Orban came to power in 2010, it looked very similar than today looks. So he took his oath in parliament, then went out in front of the parliament to a huge rally, held a speech. He also referred to a sort of revolution in the voting booth. And promised something very different to come. But the previous ruling party, the Hungarian Socialist Party, held on to 16 more years. So they were actually finished off by Pater Magyar's Tisza party just this year. This is the first year that the Hungarian Socialist Party will not be in parliament in any shape or form. So for the death of the previous socialist era, we needed 16 more years, and Fidesz seems quite a bit quicker, to be honest. So they are evaporating as we speak, and nobody expected this.
And just wondering what that does for national discourse or debate within Hungary. Magyar's government, he has a super majority. So are there any fears from Hungarians possibly that maybe with someone having so much control over the government that perhaps down the line something similar might happen?
We are still in the honeymoon period, and nobody really likes to think about this. Journalists are always anxious about these things, so of course we are wary of this sort of mandate that they got. And you have to also say that with this election result, Tisza and Magyar would have been winning in every electoral system. But this system was designed by Fidesz for this very reason, to give the biggest boost to the biggest party possible. So they were, in the end, betrayed by their own system. And you can thank this huge mandate Tisza got to the electoral system that Fidesz designed. And we, of course, are wary, but the signs are better, to be honest, so far. Fidesz was also not the first party that had a super majority in parliament. So the socialist and liberal governments in the middle of the 90s also had a constitutional majority, but they decided to not use it. So basically what they said is that they will only adopt laws that require a 2/3 majority by a 4/5 majority, so by the agreement of the whole parliament. This government didn't make that promise yet, but they seem to be open to criticism, and that's why they already switched 2 candidates after announcing them for ministerial posts. They seem to be reflective of everybody else, and also the political situation is quite different. So Fidesz, Viktor Orban's Fidesz was a coherent single party. Meanwhile, Pater Magyar's Tisza is a big tent coalition with a lot of different and very varied sort of ideological sides between them. And Pater Magyar understands that he cannot lose anybody from that big tent because nobody knows what will happen after it. So he have to make amends to rural socialists, to nationalists, to patriots, to liberals in Budapest, which requires quite a bit of compromise, I think, in politics, and that goes against the constitutional majority's open use.
Yeah, and managing such a large coalition and using all that compromise, as you mentioned, I'm wondering how he structures his priorities because there's a lot of things he wants to do to undo Orban's legacy. So there's a judiciary, public media, public procurement, the constitutional court. Where does he begin, and when will that honeymoon period that you alluded to earlier? When will that end?
It basically ended today. Or ends tomorrow. Today we have a huge party, and tomorrow the work starts. Their first priority is getting the EU funds back. That is very important because after 40 years, the last 40 years, there hasn't really been any economic growth in Hungary, and the Hungarian economy is in a very dire situation. Debt is growing, and it's already huge. There is no growth. Viktor Orban just joked yesterday in an interview that he finally sees the economy starting up, and how unlucky he is that it just after his ouster, but it doesn't seem to be true. So actually, the forint became a lot stronger because of the news that Viktor Orban is out of power. So the economy is starting to show signs of health exactly for the reason that he is out of power, which I wouldn't call really a coincidence for him. But it's going to be a very hard run. TISA will have to make very hard decisions. They will need the EU funds as soon as they can get them, and there isn't a lot of time for that. So basically, until the end of September, we have to do everything to get all funds from the recovery fund. The Orban government didn't really do anything to get those for the last 2 years, and it didn't seem possible to get those, but now it seems, and it would be a huge boost to the Hungarian economy and maybe prolong this sort of honeymoon period that they enjoy now.
Hungary is a small country, but it has an outsized weight on the geopolitical landscape here in Europe. With Viktor Orban gone and him no longer able to use those vetoes that he had so often done, what does this mean for the future ties with the EU, Russia's war against Ukraine, and so on?
So when we last spoke I mentioned that I expect this government to be quite similar to early Fidesz governments. So they will be quite contrarian. They will represent their nationalist interests quite well in the EU, but they will be able to make compromises, which early Fidesz could still do, but later Fidesz sort of lost that ability. And that's still what I would expect, that this is a great help for Ukraine, I think, because we are no longer blocking their accession without any cause, really. Pater Magyar still represents the Hungarian minorities' interests in Ukraine quite heavily, to be honest, surprisingly so. But it doesn't mean that there is no compromise to be made, and I think the Ukrainian side also understands that. It is quite interesting, though, and probably the most interesting thing that we have seen is the rebirth of the Visegrad 4 cooperation with Poland, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia. And just a few weeks after Orban was ousted, they already posted the 3 prime ministers of the Visegrad countries a selfie waiting for Pater Magyar, saying that the 3 musketeers are already back and waiting for the 4th. And to be honest, nobody expected this, and nobody expected it this quick. So I think it was a huge sort of development for Pater Magyar and Hungary's outsized influence, because the Visegrad group is what gives these countries their outsized influence in Central and Eastern Europe. It is a hugely important power center.
Zsolt, thank you so much for your time. I think we'll be speaking to you again in the near future. Zsolt Kerner, a reporter from 24.hu. Thank you.